Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show Jen Johans, who is a three-time national award-winning writer and full-time walking movie encyclopedia. Jen Johans of filmintuition.com delivers a steady stream of great movie recommendations, thoughtful career deep dives, and first-rate conversations with critics, authors, actors, journalists, filmmakers, and more on her podcast, Watch with Jen. Jen, welcome back. Thanks again for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always such a pleasure to chat about movies with you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And we are diving into this classic Altman film. So for people who haven't seen it, I'll just read a short synopsis. So a Hollywood studio executive is being sent death threats by a writer whose script he rejected. But which one? This was released in 1992. It was directed by Robert Altman. It was written by Michael Tolkin, and he adapted the screenplay from the novel, which is his novel as well. And we've got a large ensemble cast, as well as plenty of very fun cameos, but I'll name the
Yes.
main cast. So Tim Robbins, Greta Scacchi, Fred Ward, Whoopi Goldberg, Peter Gallagher, Brion James, Cynthia Stevenson, VIncent D'Onofrio, Dean Stockwell, Richard E. Grant, Sidney Pollack, Lyle, Lovett, Dina, Merrill. I mean, it's endless. How many actors
Yes.
are in it? Talk to me, Jen, because I read on your Instagram or Twitter post that this was the first Altman film you saw. Is that right?
Yes, I would have been about like 11 or 12, and we just rented everything that was new. I had pretty liberal parents, and I was also just kind of, my parents joke, born 40. So I loved movies with lots of complicated plot lines and mysteries, and this one was right up my alley, especially because I was a movie geek. So it was about Hollywood. It's one I kept renting. I just remember going back and renting it again and again. It is still my favorite Robert Altman movie, but I'm a huge fan of the filmmaker. So I have many favorites, but this would be chief among them for sure.
And what is it about this film that makes it a favorite for you? What do you love about it?
I love so much about it. I think that it subverts the genre, just like The Long Goodbye, another Altman, or pretty much all of his movies. He loves doing satire, although this one, there was a famous quote like, it tickles, it doesn't draw blood. I can't remember which critic said that,
Oh,
maybe
I
Candy.
like that.
Yes. And even Altman is like, we don't really offend anyone. It's a gentle satire compared to sort of the pitch black satires of genre movies in the past. But I do like that it's a thriller, but all of his movies are kind of about character more than plot. He's famously a filmmaker who doesn't believe in story or storytelling. He thinks that's secondary. He compares his process more to painting. And I just remember finding it fascinating on a number of levels. And the cast is phenomenal. I
Oh,
mean,
so good.
we'll get into the people on the Hollywood side, but I also love the cops, Lyle Lovett, and Whoopi Goldberg is phenomenal. Just so much good stuff. How about you? What is your relationship with this one?
I was trying to pin down when I first saw it, and I can't quite remember. And even Altman himself, even though I've seen a number of his films, I
Hmm.
there's also a lot of them I haven't seen. Like I went through his IMDb, and I was like, wow, he made a lot. You forget he made a lot of not only feature films, but made for television films and
Yeah,
tons of television.
that's where he
And
started. Yeah.
yeah, industrial videos. And
Yes.
by the time he made his first feature, he was in his 40s by then, which I forgot that he was a little older than some of the other new Hollywood directors at that time who were
Yeah.
early 30s and stuff like that. So I still I feel like I haven't really dove into his work because you can't just watch a film of his once because they're complex, they're layered. There's so much going on, and I don't think I've really truly dove into his filmography yet. And again, I was trying to think, when did I first see this? It was certainly a while ago, but what I remember was liking it, but not really loving it. And I can see why, maybe when I was much younger, not quite loving it, because it's a little like some of Godard's films, where it's like,
Yeah.
commentary and the self-conscious filmmaking style,
Yes.
and the satire. And I don't think I think I was taking the film probably too seriously. And I think I sort of missed out on what it was really about, because I always really enjoyed the Hollywood stuff in it, particularly the beginning, which is like they're doing like a spoof on the Touch of Evil, long
Yeah.
opening shot, which is all in one take. And
Yeah,
here
and
I
they
think it's
reference rope
roughly,
and all of
yeah,
this.
rope. There's references throughout, and they're constantly reminding you that you're watching a film. And then it
Yes.
occurred to me when I saw it that I think the challenge with this film, and I can't imagine many filmmakers who could have pulled it off other than Altman, being so good with, clashing styles of genres and satire and commentary. And like, he's just, I can't think of any directors who can combine so many things and make it work. And it occurred to me that, perhaps this is partly my own take, but the film within the film, the crime story, which is the fact that this writer is sending him these threatening messages, and
Yeah.
then he kills the writer, and then he's trying to get away with it, and the cops are
Wrong
after.
guy.
Yeah, exactly. It occurred to me that in a way that crime story, it's sort of like a mediocre noir. I mean, I love film noir, but they're trying to do like a not a great noir intentionally, because ultimately it's like it's from the imagination of the Tim Robbins character. I mean, in a way, he's sort of writing this, which also
Mhm.
adds to the joke of the one of the other characters talking about that they should just get rid of writers, which I
Yeah.
thought, which
Yeah.
I
And
thought was
then
funny.
if we get rid of actors and directors, then we're
Yeah,
on to something. They make that joke. And that was, yeah, all of the artistic process. But I love what you were saying about from the imagination and never letting you forget you're watching a movie. The
right.
posters in his office are always commenting on what's going
Oh,
on. Yeah,
yes.
like the big house and dangerous, or, it's just in the background. You can see them reminding you what you're watching. You talked about kind of a mediocre noir, and it is. I mean, because it's missing those elements of, he, spoiler alert, he gets away with it, and how he gets away with it, and bringing in a character later on, like a couple characters, a witness we didn't know about, a lawyer that we just meet, and then 5 minutes later he's gone, so it's kind of taking these elements that would be sort of primary in a traditional
Yeah.
noir. And it's interesting because the first thing that Altman did, the first project that he sold, was a film noir for Lawrence Tierney called
Mm,
Bodyguard. Yeah, when he
right.
got back from doing, more than 50 bombing missions in World War II. And
Right.
I love that you also brought up the new Hollywood of it all, because it reminds me of how Cameron Crowe and Richard Linklater are kind of considered Gen X directors, but they're actually boomers. And when you talk about Robert Altman, he's from the World War II
That's
generation and not
true. Yeah.
really, yeah. So he's kind of like they're from a different generation than you would expect. But at the same time, there's nobody who feels more 70s than
Yes.
Robert Altman. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, that was like the perfect decade for the kind of movies he was interested, because they dealt more with reality. They, dealt more with genre, but obviously combined like genre, but when I say genre, also strong with character. And they were
Hmm.
cynical, and they were rough, they were dangerous, they were provocative, they were ugly.
Mm-hmm.
They were black comedy. I mean, it was kind of perfect for that time. So I'm not surprised when the 80s rolled around that he that he had such trouble,
Yeah.
and his career went in a different way. And it's funny that they I always find this funny in Hollywood when they look at this film and they say this is like a comeback. It's like the guy never left. He was working all the
No.
time. He was doing theater. I saw an interview with him where they were like, "Oh, are people are looking at the fact that you're doing plays in LA now as like a step down." And he laughed. He's like, "I see it as a step up."
Yeah,
And I
he
like
always
that.
did that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that he said that. And it just goes to show, and the film sort of is a criticism of this in a way. It just goes to show how people are just so obsessed with what appears to be successful in, not maybe
Mm-hmm.
just in Hollywood, but maybe we look at it in all kinds of different
Sure.
industries or people in general, is that like success is box office, it's big wins. He's another player in the game, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's it's sort of, I mean, what is that? Why is that kind of success so great? Like what are they doing that's so great just because their movies make this Hollywood kind of junk, that mainstream stuff is what's making all this money. Why is that necessarily successful? And I think the film really is getting at that, because this story, this crime story, like you said, it even has plot holes in it. And
Yeah.
he mentioned, like, for example, and I thought it was kind of strange when he's trying to figure out who this writer is, which leads him to D'Onofrio's character. And I was like, how did he figure out who it is? Like, he went through the computer really, really quickly, and then suddenly he's like, got him. And I was like, am I missing something here? And then I went
Yeah.
to the
I
the
love the
commentary.
idea. Yeah, where he asks his girlfriend, like, how long until they get dangerous? And she just throws out 6 months. So he just randomly grabs these two names from April, which is when we're
Yeah,
recording this. And I thought that was kind of perfect. But yeah, you said you went to the
right.
commentary. Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to the commentary track because I was curious. I'm like, this story, they didn't necessarily say that the intention of the crime story was meant to be like a mediocre story. But I got the impression that that's what they were getting at, because like that was such a big plot hole. And what Altman said was that they just did it very, very quickly so that the
Hmm.
audience wouldn't sort of stop and think about it. They just sort of like they brought the music up, the volume on the music up, and they just did it so quickly to just get him to
Yeah, he's
to
writing his
to
own
D'Onofrio.
story, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And that was what I when I had seen it in the past, that was another thing that I just thought, well, Greta Scacchi's character, June, I was like, well, this it's really like not a great part. I mean, she's doesn't seem to be that upset that her boyfriend is dead. Even later on when he basically admits that he killed her boyfriend, she doesn't really she doesn't really seem to
Yeah.
care all that much. And also the fact that he goes to her, and even the dialogue is so contrived. I mean, this is what Altman said. It's like some of these scenes were contrived. He goes to her and he's like, I just want to make love to you. And and she's like, no, no, it's too soon, not yet. The filmmakers pointed out that it's like, well, yeah, because he wants to marry this woman and have
Yeah.
children with her, which we see at the end. So of course it's a figment of his imagination that she's not someone who would jump into bed with him after her boyfriend got killed, because he wouldn't want to marry someone like that.
Yeah, and I
you
love her
know.
name too, Goodman's daughter. Yep, she's a good
Oh
man's
yes.
daughter. And I
Oh
thought
God, I
that,
didn't even pick up on that.
and also just how funny it is, like she's a painter or an artist, but she doesn't really have respect for other forms of art. Like
Yeah.
she doesn't like movies, she doesn't even like books or reading or scripts. She said she likes words. So she's kind of one of those like pretentious artists, like, oh, I'm an artist, but has no respect for anybody else's art. And
Right.
so I thought that was funny that he's like drawn to this sort of person that he's idealizing way out of proportion. And there's also this great moment when he takes Vincent D'Onofrio's character out and they're at the Japanese restaurant and he calls her the Ice Queen. And it
Mm,
kind of it shows you like, yep, this is not. And then he said, "You'll like her. You guys are similar," or something like that.
right.
And I thought that was
Right.
perfect too.
And she's
Yeah.
from Iceland.
Iceland, yes. He
You
needs an
know,
icy because boy, it's cold at the end of the, I mean, he's a cold bastard, but at the
right.
end of the movie, I mean, like his old love, he has no time for her when she gets fired, and it's like a
Oh
horrible
yeah.
moment. And it's like, nope, he's the Ice King, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's ultimately soulless.
Yeah.
And apparently, and Altman said that Greta Scacchi, who played June, was like, well, who is this woman? I suppose she just felt that there wasn't much there. And
Yeah.
Altman said, is she is just a figment of his imagination. It's not a real. And then she said, well, I don't want to play a perfect woman. And he's like, she's not a perfect woman. It's just, this
No.
is the way she sees. This is just the way he wants this woman to be. And I thought it was interesting that they made her a painter and that she's not interested in movies, because he has that line earlier where they all go out to lunch, and that's where you see like some of the Hollywood cameos, Joan Cusack and Angelica Houston. And he's like, can we all just stop talking about Hollywood for 1 second? Like, we're all educated people. And then no one has anything else to talk about.
Yes, and he
And
erupts
even
up in
he
laughter.
laughs.
Yeah.
Right. But I think there obviously was something about that appealed to him. And of course, their conversations, there's, so many references to things not being real. Even later when he brings her to that like desert resort, it just seems like it's out of a dream. Like there's just this one couple
Yes.
there dancing, and then they jump into the pool naked,
Yeah.
and she even says, oh, well, is this even real? And he goes, only in the movies.
Yeah, and it shows the contrast between the two women because he was with somebody who had a mind of her own. She would critique things. He took her to a party and she tried to talk about script notes to Marlee Matlin, and that was the wrong time to bring it
Oh,
up at a
right.
party. And then he's with June, who's just kind of like this beautiful, like fragile ice queen doll who really isn't that interesting. But
Right.
she thinks she is. But yeah, he can just sort of make her or shape her or mold
Right.
her kind of into whatever he wants. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I thought that was a really fascinating way to do it. And I just kept thinking, on paper, this just looks like it would be very difficult to pull off. Like I could see this just being like one big cartoon, or just a total spoof or a total joke. And they
Yeah.
still, I mean, the jokes come through and the satire comes through, but it's still, with a film within a film that's not a great story intentionally. How does one engage an audience emotionally? And it's hard
Mm-hmm.
to put into words, and I think a good work of art, it can be difficult to say, well, 2 + 2 = 4, this is how they did it. But I was curious, does anything stand out to you about how does one get emotionally involved in something where they're constantly reminding you this is a movie within a movie? I mean, I was curious if you had any thoughts on that.
I think you just sort of lose yourself in the mood or the world, and it kind of operates again to go back to Altman and the Ice Queen's profession. It's like a painting, and you just kind of lose yourself in it, and it's taking you through this world that's not really real, but it's also just aesthetically appealing. There's this great sequence where Richard E. Grant, who's just a phenomenal actor. I love
Oh
him with
yeah.
Nail and I. And
Yeah, me too.
he's summing up this movie idea that he has, and he says it's a minute or whatever, and it's way longer than that. but he opens with the most vivid imagery, like it's people with umbrellas and candles, and it looks like Japanese lanterns, or he uses some kind of imagery and then puts his hands and, like, there's one face in the car, and it's a moment. And that's kind of what this movie is. It loses you in these moments and this world. And just like you are completely transported immediately into his story. Same thing. You brought up ugliness earlier with Altman, and nobody does a more beautiful ugly than Altman. Like, McCabe and Mrs. Miller is one of the ugliest movies, but it's the most beautifully shot
Yeah,
ugly movie you'll ever see.
right.
And that kind of thing. So even though we have these characters who are amoral or doing ugly things, you just kind of lose yourself in this world. I also, like I said, as fun as the Hollywood of it all is, I get really invested in the whole, because it doesn't really follow a traditional noir plot, but the police obviously know this is the guy.
Right.
And they're trying anything they can to rattle him. There's one of my favorite, just the composition of the shot is when they're in the police station and he's there, and you have like Lovett over there, like swatting flies, and then this other woman, and
Oh
there's
yeah.
nowhere for him to sit down. And Whoopi Goldberg is missing her box of tampons, and then he gets a different box, and well, these are slender, these aren't mine. And like anything they can do to rattle this guy.
Yes.
And it's fabulous. Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering, I'm like, why is she talking about tampons?
Yes.
And then yeah, you're right, because that was
Anything.
something,
Yep.
yeah, that was something they said in the commentary. It was, it's like good cop, bad cop. It's a way to throw him,
Yep.
to throw him off. And I love later on when they do the police lineup, and the woman who
She's
said,
like, yes. Like, you mean
she
number three, right? Or number five? Yeah.
right. She picks the cop in the lineup,
Yes.
and
And Whoopi's
I
trying to like
particularly,
direct her, sort of. You
yeah,
meant
yeah.
number
Are you
five,
sure it's
right?
not that guy? But I like, as soon as she entered again, she's like, "Oh, this is just like it is on television." It's like
Yes.
nothing's
Yeah.
real.
No.
It's just these people who are like, like the saying goes, um living in la la land, that even
Yes.
the reality of killing someone is not real, and he's using movie techniques, movie logic,
Yeah.
to get
To
out
do
of
it.
it,
Yeah.
or mediocre movie logic, I should say, to get at it. And even as he's stalked by the police officer, who we think must be either the someone who saw him do it, or actually, oh no, you got the wrong writer, this is the real writer. That was, that we find out that he is the detective. um you
Yeah.
know
For a while, you think it is Lyle Lovett for sure.
yeah, and it was one thing I didn't pick up on was that the voice of the writer that you hear at the end, as he calls to say that it's him, and that he knows everything that Tim Robbins' character did, Griffin
Yeah.
Mill, and then he blackmails him to say, well, I'm gonna put this all into a script, and if you produce it, then I won't tell anyone. And the guy's like, sure. I mean, Altman pointed out that at the funeral, the guy who's doing the eulogy, that's him, that's the writer. And I was like, oh, I never picked up on that. It's
Same
the
actor?
same.
Wow.
It's the same voice. So because that guy's
Oh, that's
talking like,
incredible.
yeah, yeah. I didn't pick up on that. So, and I think also just Altman talks about that the actors are most, to him anyways, the actors are the most important thing in a movie. And I think you feel that because the performances are so good and everyone's so committed, that how Tim Robbins made you still get on this guy's side, even though he's so despicable, is hard to pull off. And he's so good in it. But I think it's also has to do with the writing, because he does develop, you do get a sense that he does have a conscience, that he feels bad about about what he did, as he goes back to see June, then confessing the murder. There is a sense of, oh God, what did I do? And then, of course, once he gets away with it, and a year goes by, now he's the head of the studio. It
Yeah.
just to be, it's just another story that went on the back burner, but is now coming. You're going to be on the big screen soon.
Yeah, I almost think it's like he feels bad just temporarily, and then he immediately shifts into, I don't know if it's sublimation, but nope, now I'm in love with her. But I love that you brought up who the actual perp was, or the voice. It reminds me of the movie Zodiac, and
Oh
how
yeah,
Fincher kind of blended together various voices of the actor when the Zodiac would talk, except for the scene with Ione Skye in the car. I guess he did have John Carroll Lynch, and it was just John Carroll Lynch, who we find out later Robert Graysmith, Gyllenhaal believes is the Zodiac. It's just his voice threatening to throw the baby out the window of the car. And
right.
so in a way, Fincher is kind of playing on this is the guy and sort of setting it up so when you hear that voice later or you see him, that's the guy. And so that's interesting. It's kind of
Oh, that's
like if
still,
you're
I
paying
never put that
attention,
together.
yeah, that's crazy. I love that about the player for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I didn't know that, and if he didn't say that on the commentary, I don't think I
Yeah,
would have.
would have never
Yeah, I would
seen
have
this
never
movie
picked up on
dozens
it.
of times, never put that together.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, there you go, right? There's always something new to see. But that last image where he pull is almost felt like something out of a David Lynch film as he pulls into this
Yeah.
driveway. His wife is now pregnant. You see the American flag there. She's
It's
waving,
so, yes. Yeah, it's
And Altman
a
said it's almost like a horror film. And
little
that
bit.
I could,
Yeah.
yeah, that last scene there is something horrific.
The
Um,
Rosemary's Baby style music that plays.
yes,
Yeah, the
yes,
la
yes,
la la.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Oh, yeah.
creepy.
That is. Yeah, it was that kind of a tune.
Yeah.
And there was something just kind of so horrifying and
Stepford
sickening
too.
about
Yeah.
it. And Altman said he's like, well, it's actually he said it's a mild indictment of Hollywood. He goes, Hollywood's much worse.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Did you happen to see the con press conference? It's on the Criterion channel. It's also on the Blu-ray. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I probably did when I first got the Blu-ray like years ago, but I didn't get a chance to watch it for this. But no. So what happened on that?
It's really really good, and just he's so blunt, about, like, he's not shy to say what this is about, and who they're sort of criticizing. And he's like,
Oh
well,
yeah.
Hollywood's always been greedy, and they always will be. And he's like, they think they can get rid of all the artists, and, well, we just keep finding a way to come back. And then he even turns to the journalist, and he's like, stop printing the box office numbers of
Yeah.
movies. He goes, this is what's destroying movies. And here we are, 32 years later, and that's way worse than it's ever. That's all you hear about. Barbie made 50 billion, whatever. And it's they're putting they're making you feel that, well, this is great because look at all the money it's making.
Yeah.
And
Or
I
Rotten
really wish they'd
Tomatoes.
stop doing that.
Yeah, like I was torn. I was a film critic professionally for like over 15 years, and then finally I was deemed okay, you can be in Rotten Tomatoes now. And I never really got my entire backlog updated, just a couple reviews, and I'm okay with that. I don't like this idea of putting numbers on movies. I'd
Oh,
rather
me
I
too.
actually, as a film critic, it's funny, it's like sort of sacrilege, but I don't read them. I don't read reviews until after I see the movie because I don't want
Right.
to engage with the film. I don't even like watching trailers. I want to go in completely open and
Mm,
see a movie and experience it that way and then read everything about it and find out. But I steer clear of box office and that kind of thing. But I love
right.
what you're saying about, Hollywood being much worse. I recently wrote a Blu-ray essay for the upcoming imprint release out of Australia of David Mamet's Homicide in the
Oh
new
yes, yes.
neo-noir box number 3. And so I was rereading all my old Mammoths, and he just put out a memoir. And, let's face it, Mamet is a little off his rocker right now. But
Oh yeah.
in the new memoir, he tells the story of like his first experience was talking to Bob Rafelson, and he was writing for, Postman Always Rings Twice. And Rafelson, in their first meeting, like one of the first things he said to him was, "You're going to hear that I threw a studio executive out of a plate glass window. It's true."
Oh God.
And
Oh God.
yes, it's true. And then Mohammed said, and that was my introduction to Hollywood, and like it's still like the most prescient thing he heard. And like so yeah, it's way worse, but the player is kind of mild. They even made it so the movie came out around the Oscars, like around that time. That's when it was released in theaters. Altman purposely, it has over 65 celebrities in the film. And
Yes.
he purposely demanded that actors' names were not in the advertising. So when you saw like ads on TV or trailers, it didn't say like Tim Robbins or Greta Scacchi or any of these people. You just saw the movie and,
Right.
just kind of saw it that way. And I also love that it's a movie being very aware of movies, like the entire last sequence when habeas corpus is made into a movie. And, can we get Julia Roberts? And it's Julia Roberts. It's fabulous. Yes.
Yeah. I love that whole, well, because another thing Altman was saying was that he and the screenwriter and the novelist as well was, they're not just criticizing the studio heads, because he's like, well,
No,
people also write those movies whether they're compromising or not. And you see that the two guys who
we're
initially pitched
staunch.
that,
Yeah.
yes, they were like, they pitched the movie and like, no Hollywood happy endings. We don't want any stars. It
Stars. Yeah.
sounded like more of a realistic movie. And then, of course, what do they do at the end? They have
Happy.
Julia Roberts, they have Bruce Willis, and they add on this happy ending. And I love the line, Bonnie says to oh God, what's his name again? You
Uh,
the Richard E. Grant, who plays
yes.
Tom Oakley, and he's so fiery and passionate in it. And he's like, "I thought you didn't want a Hollywood happy ending. What is this?" And he's like, "Well, I'm paraphrasing, but I love what he's like. Well, they tested it, and everyone hated the test, and so we added the happy ending." He's like,
Yes.
"That's the reality." I thought, "Oh God." So again, Altman showing you that, because he admitted that it's even an indictment on himself that he has compromised in the
Oh
past,
yeah.
and he's like, we're artists do these things too. It's not just the studio
Hmm.
executives, right? And I
No.
thought, that didn't really dawn on me. But I was like, yeah, he's right, because if you look at what these guys do in the Dean Stockwell characters, they are selling out, even though they feel like, or they say they wouldn't. It's you could see why that it's a very seductive industry, right? And it does, stardom and money. It's like being seduced by the devil. So it's very, I don't know. Did that stand out to you, and those elements against even kind of
Yes.
criticizing the artists?
I agree with you. And I mean, you see that, actors are basically just hired and actors in an Altman movie are very important collaborators because, so many of them talk about on day one, he'll be like, "Do you have your scripts or know your scripts? Like, throw it out. We're just going to improvise."
Yeah.
And so you see how many filmmakers kind of took that from that. And I think he shares a birthday with Mike Lee, which is fascinating because Lee makes
Oh,
his
I did
films
not know
like
that.
that. But yeah, I see that. Also, I read the Tolkien novel like decades ago, but I had completely forgotten this, and one of my followers on Twitter pointed it out. I think they pointed it out, or somebody else did the last time too. But earlier in the movie, when Bonnie, Cynthia or Stevenson is reading this really cheesy love scene, like pulls her
Oh, in the
down on
hot
the
tub.
buckboard and even the horses are horny or something or whatever it is. I guess that came right from Tolkien's book. So Tolkien's even satirizing himself like, yeah, this was cheesy. And so he's putting it in there. And so I love that. Yeah. I think they're all saying nobody is too precious or perfect, or everybody just is willing to compromise themselves slightly. And then before you know it, how much have you compromised or sold out? Yeah.
Right, right. Well, they Altman and Tolkien, they were saying like Bonnie, who Cynthia Stevenson plays, like she's the one. If anyone has a conscience,
Yes.
it's probably her. She's the one who says to the writer, hey, I thought you didn't want a Hollywood happy
Yeah. Any
ending.
integrity. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And she's such perfect casting because Altman even says she doesn't seem like a quote unquote typical Hollywood person. Like she
Yeah.
there's something, and I mean this in a good way, like ordinary about her. Like she just
Girl
seems
next
like,
door. Yep.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's this element of like the nudity in the film is interesting because they all who Griffin Mill even says, he talks about, well, in order to market a film, we need sex, we need violence,
Yeah. Yeah.
we need nudity, and of course the film has all that, but it's done as a spoof, right? And so
Yep.
we even see like that couple at the resort, they get in naked, and it's pointless, right? And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
always it's usually pointless
Yep.
in movies.
Yeah.
And even in that hot tub, like there's no need for her to be
No.
topless.
No.
But it's also funny because she's reading about a sex scene, and then he's trying to tell her what his problem is by pitching it as a script, like you had referenced before with the stalking. Like he has to talk about it in movie terms. But a bit of trivia was that he said to her, "Oh, do you mind being naked in this?" And she's like, "Oh, well, no one's ever asked me to be naked." He goes, "Well, here's a first." He didn't say that, but I mean, this was the first time she did it, I suppose. And some people have said, well, he's sort of playing with your expectations because you would have perhaps expected like to have seen Greta Scacchi's character
Yeah. She
naked because
said
she's the
no.
more,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's what I read, and some
Yep.
people were. I mean, maybe they were trying to like,
Push back
because
a little. Yeah.
they have that sex scene, but it's a close up on their faces, but it actually works out to be much more erotic. I thought it was done
Yeah.
really really well, and
Yep.
they were saying that was like, oh, it's intentional because you're playing with the expectations, like you perhaps the audience really would rather see Greta Scacchi get naked because that's the conventional thing, but we're not going to do that. But I don't think that's actually true. I think they made that up.
Yeah.
I
I
guess it
heard
depends on
she
whose
said
story
she
you
didn't
believe,
want it.
right?
Yeah. And he kind of does have very ordinary nudity in his movie. Like the films, The Company is a movie I love that he made that's super underrated,
Oh,
following the
I haven't seen
Joffrey
that.
ballet. And like we have people changing in the dressing room for no reason. And it's just kind of like ordinary nudity. And of course, right after The Player, I saw Shortcuts, which is a film I
Oh,
still go
yeah,
back and forth on. I think it's some of it I think is brilliant. I think it's extremely well done, but it's not one I revisit that much.
yeah. I've
But it,
only
of
seen it once,
course,
so I can't
yeah,
really truly comment. But I remember
yes,
taking to it more than probably his other ones, which I liked more on second or third viewings. But
yeah, that has the most famous,
yeah.
sequence with Julianne Moore from
Oh
the
yes.
waist down, where
Yeah.
she's nude for, I want to say it's like 3 minutes long.
Right.
And Julianne has talked about it that she was, totally gung-ho because she said it's sort of a spoof or a satire on intimacy in marriage. And like, why
Right.
is she just naked from the waist down? Usually in movies, it would be from the waist up. And I think
Right.
she's ironing in the scene or something like that. And so it kind of goes against what you would expect. Yeah, Altman does that. He is, I mean, you watch his movies, he's a horny guy. I mean, I think he will admit that. Those movies, the early ones, yeah, you see that quite a bit.
Hmm.
But The Player it's great. I would love to know what other Altmans that you've seen that you were a fan of, or maybe what you're intending to watch soon.
Well, I would really love to see as many of them as I can, even like the
Yeah.
on the Criterion channel 10 or 88, the which is
Oh
a
yes,
series.
yes, Cynthia
That looks
Nixon.
fascinating, and
Yeah.
I still have to see that. But yeah, like I said, I really like Shortcuts. I loved California Split,
Oh, one of
The
my
Long
favorites.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes. Have you seen Nashville?
Nashville. Yeah, I saw that just at the beginning of the pandemic about
Such a
four
good
years
film.
ago. I
Yeah.
recently saw, and I really liked it, was his second film. That is it, That Cold Day in the Park, I think it's called.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I did an episode of Watch with Jen with the filmmaker Ben David Grabinski, and we
Yeah, I
did
was
his
listening to
sort of,
that.
yeah, his trippy movies like Cold Day in the Park. Is it Three Sisters or Three Women? I'm
Three Women. Yeah.
Three Women. Yeah, I'm sort of twisting it with De Palma's sisters. Different
Oh,
movie. And also Images. We talked about those.
Images, really good.
Yeah. And then recently I did an episode with my friend Sean Burns, who's a film critic, on underrated Altman, or the ones that
Ah,
really don't get talked about as much. So we did his TV movie that was just remade. And we did, oh, I'm trying to remember, Brewster McCloud, and just also Cookie's Fortune, which is a film that
yeah, I haven't
I
seen either of
love.
those.
Yeah. And I've covered other ones on the podcast, like we talked about Kansas City in an episode with
Mm.
Jennifer Jason Lee. I am a huge fan of his stuff, and yeah, so I'm excited to see you explore more Altman. And I mean, some movies you're gonna love, some you're gonna be like, what on earth? So yeah, I can't wait.
Well, there's so many. I mean, of
So
course, I've seen
many.
Popeye. If you were born in the 80s, that's
Yes.
or 90s, that or if you're a kid in general and you're getting to a Altman film, it's
Yeah.
likely going to be Popeye. Secret Honor. I
Such a
quite like.
great film.
I did see Buffalo Bill and the Indians or Sitting Bull's history lesson, and I didn't
Yeah.
really take to it, but I
No.
will give it another chance. Mash is, I know it probably sounds sacrilege, but I have to see it again, but I did not take to it. I saw it maybe 13 years ago. But like
Yeah.
he's a
Good.
filmmaker that, you can't just watch once. They're so
Yeah.
layered, got to be in a certain mood. They're challenging. You got to
Um,
go to them and wrestle with them, and they're not, so if you're not in the right mood, it can be a rough watch, even in his more like on the surface, like this one, quote unquote,
yeah.
entertaining films.
Have you seen Gosford Park? That's one of my favorites.
Another, I still have
Oh,
not
I
seen
think you'll
that.
love that one.
Yeah.
Especially as an actor. I think just tremendous. I love this sort of his stylistic overlapping dialogue, and the
Oh
way
yeah.
his tracking shots just kind of go around people. And I guess he listens, with his headphones and makes sure that you can hear the important parts. But he said,
That's
if you
so
have
difficult.
like 14 people at a dinner party, you're not going to have just two people talking. Everyone's going to be
Right.
breaking off into side conversations. He
Right.
said, so I just like making movies like that. And so you do kind of, like you said, every time you watch, like, The Player, I've seen it dozens of times, you might zero in. This time I was laughing more at Andy McDowell's perspective and that scene where she like
Oh
can't
yeah.
wait to get away from those guys. So you see stuff from different perspectives or hear things. And Gosford Park has just one of the greatest casts. And I mean, all of his movies do, but especially that one. And it's fun to watch that one maybe a few times and suddenly zero in more on something a different character says. So I think that one you should go with next. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I heard it was somewhat like The Rules of the Game, which I love, the
Yes.
Renoir.
Uh,
So yeah, I'll have to check that out. But I love the overlapping dialogue because and I don't think anyone else does that to the extent that he
no.
did. And it's ironic because I don't know if you saw the documentary from 10 years ago that's called Altman
Yes, I did.
2015.
Uh-huh.
Really good, and I revisited it, and he told the story of his first feature film, which is called Countdown, that he Jack Warner, because Warner Brothers Seven Arts did it, and Warner didn't even want him and told him from the beginning, I don't want you to do this. Talk about like
Yeah.
giving guy like no confidence whatsoever. And so he said, what everyone else wants you to do it. So he's like, go ahead. So he did it. And then he, right at the end of it, Warner watched the dailies and saw the overlapping dialogue and fired him, thinking, "What an
Yes.
idiot! Who the hell would do that?" And to think that that innovation that got him fired is what everyone loves.
Yeah.
You know, I thought that
Yeah,
was
he's
such a great
famous for
story.
the thing that, some people love it, some people hate it. Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
exactly.
No, I
Kind
like.
of zero in on what makes you unique and singular.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he makes it work. He makes it work so well. And just a couple of other things. On the player was, and talk about how relevant this is today, because there's that big banquet, and that's where you see, I think it's like a banquet, you see a lot of the, that's where you see a lot of the cameos, Cher, Elliot
Yes.
Gould, Nick
Uh-huh.
Nolte. Another note on that was that works so well because it's another reference to, oh, you're constantly watching a movie, like, oh, isn't that Jack Lemmon, isn't that Harry Belafonte and Rod Steiger, so you're constantly, oh, I thought that was a brilliant idea on Altman's part. But as Tim Robbins Griffin, the character, gets up, he gives a speech talking about movies being art, and
Yeah.
he is so full of it, because these are guys who don't care anything about art,
No.
who
Mm-mm.
would get rid of the writer if they could. Talk about now with AI. Those are those
Hmm.
same conversations they're likely having. Well, forget about the writer. We'll just use AI. And he's talking about art, and I just thought, it reminds me so much. And I don't know how you feel about the whole Marvel argument. Scorsese 5 years
Yeah.
ago saying, "Oh, well, it's not art," and then you got all these fights about whether it's art or not. And I'm like, is this a real art? Like, is this a real? Is this a real debate? I mean, can't they just come out to say, "Look, we love these movies and we want to make entertaining films for families,
Make all
and they're
kinds of
well
films.
made, and
Yeah.
why do they have to also say that they're works of art and make it seem like they're on the level of a Scorsese or an Altman?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, they have to have everything. They have to have the Oscars, they have to have the box office, they have to say it's art. It can't just be, oh, like, just be like, just be honest, right? Like, why? And I just thought
Yeah.
that speech, it's like that's exactly what they're doing now. And I just thought, oh my God, this film, you could tell these were insiders, writing the
Yeah,
story.
absolutely. I agree
Um,
with you. I just wish they made all kinds of movies, not just one kind,
oh,
and getting
yeah,
just, dwindling amounts of films. Like this came out in the 90s when we were still making thrillers for grown-ups and
right.
all kinds of movies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's really fascinating to me. It would be interesting to do like a part two of this, dare I say a sequel, because it's if any, it's worse. Like, it's way
Yeah.
these kind of things are, and they're having these same conversations. They're just a little bit different now. Um, it's
Same
endlessly
as it ever
fascinating.
was. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
as Altman said. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about the player?
No, it's still my favorite Altman, but I love so many of his films. I love that you brought up California Split because during the
Oh, yeah.
pandemic, I revisited that for the first time in ages. And for whatever reason, that became kind of a comfort movie that I watched way too much during the pandemic. So that kind of entered the top three or top five of his in my estimation. But I'm a huge fan. So I just want to thank you so much for letting me come talk about Altman with you.
My pleasure. And for people, I know you've been on the show before, but for people joining us for the first time and hearing about you for the first time, as well as me, could you talk a little bit about what Watch with Jen is all about?
Sure, I am in season 5 right now. We've had well over 200 episodes of the podcast. It started right before lockdown. I had been planning to start a podcast before that anyway, and then that sort of became a great time to talk to people. I joke that it's sort of like taking a different film survey course every week, or every time I talk to somebody, I bring
That's how I
wonderful
feel.
guests on, like Robert. And I've brought on, actors like James Urbaniak and Donal Logue, and writers like S.A. Cosby and Jordan Harper, and fellow critics like Karina Longworth, who's a
Ah,
podcaster and
yeah.
brilliant. And I've had filmmakers on like Allison Anders and Nancy Savoca, and producers like Griffin Dunn and Amy Robinson.
Oh,
And we just talk about, in those cases, their career, or else just movies that they're passionate about, and try to cover a little bit of everything. So, yeah, so you can check out Watch with Jen wherever you get your podcasts. And also, you can find my writing at filmintuition.com.
fantastic. And if people want to follow you on social media, where's the best place for them to go?
I still call it Twitter, and it's at Film
Me too.
Intuition. You can also find me on Instagram at the same handle. I am on Blue Sky and Threads, but I don't really update those very much. But yes, so that's where you can find me. I'm also on Patreon, so you can find me there as well at Film Intuition.
Great, fantastic. And I will leave the links in the description box below for where you can follow Jen on social media and check out her wonderful podcast, which I listen to often. And like those, you've had so many incredible guests. It's a really, really enriching show. And I even listen to you because I really like Jason Bailey's
Oh, I
podcast.
love Jason. Yeah.
That I'm blanking on his co-host. My apologies to his co-host.
A
His
very good
co-host,
year. Yeah.
a
And I'm
very good
blanking
year.
on it too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mike.
I'll add it in
Okay.
on text over the image. But Michael Hall, that's it.
Yeah.
Michael, I believe it's Michael Hall. But the, that is such a great show, and I really liked your episode on 1988.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was such a pleasure to do. And
Yeah.
I was glad to inspire them to watch a couple movies I love,
Mm.
Cinema Paradiso and Unbearable Lightness of Being, for the first
Oh
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, was that a first time for both of them?
Yeah, I believe
Oh
so.
wow, fantastic. Well, Jen, thanks again, and come back sometime and review another film.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you for having me. And you have to come back to my show.
Will do. Will do. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is exclusive content that I create month in and month out. And as a subscriber, you are able to vote on polls and contribute to what I do on Patreon month in and month out. So head over to the link for full details. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel by pressing the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on the thanks link and you can leave a donation there if you choose to. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner. To your top left in just a second, just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes. Also, click the like button and leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of this episode. Also, you can also share the episode. All of these things are what produce traction to my YouTube channel. So I appreciate you watching and thank you again. And I will see you in the next episode.